YouTubers! Mike Martin's here. Mike Martin's channel. A quick take from Bloomberg article. Affordable housing. Very interesting how we're running out of cities to live in, or that it's affordable for average wage earners. Not minimum wage. Average wage earners are having a tough time making ends meet and buying basic necessities. And that's what we've been talking about on this channel for years. Cities around the globe are facing a stark reality. There are not enough affordable places for people to live. Housing in most big urban areas is now considered out of reach for the average worker, fueling growing the sense that a decent home has become privilege traded among the haves, impoverishing the have-nots. So why are they saying haves and the have-nots? Well, because the have-nots are the first-time buyers that are trying to get into the market that can't get into the market. The average wage earners that have been saving for a long time to come into a market until they see a correction. The haves are the ones that bought at the right time 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago before the Chinese foreign investing and the money laundering, before it all came into light. People got in at the right time, made the right moves, and they're sitting pretty, but they can't sell their properties back. Now there's an oversupply on the market, and they're having a really tough time unloading these properties and trying to at least get back what they bought them for, if they bought them at the right time. And a lot of people didn't buy at the right time. A lot of people bought at the peak in 2017. Thorny questions abound. Should new luxury apartments in London, many owned by foreigners, be allowed to lie empty while thousands of people sit on waiting lists for affordable homes? If migrants streaming into Beijing for a better life turn to dangerous illegal dwellings, well, where will they go when those places are demolished? The worst may be yet to come. The share of the world's population living in cities projected to reach 68% by 2050, up from 55% today. The situation: rising prices have made homes in 58% of the major cities significantly unaffordable, compared with less than half years ago. According to an annual study and research firm Demographia, that means it costs more than 4.1 times the median annual income to buy a median-priced home. A typical apartment in Hong Kong now costs $7 million. That's $916,000 US for an apartment. Other hotspots include Berlin, where the grassroots campaign to nationalize housing helped propel a plan to freeze rents for 5 years. Vancouver adopted North America's first tax on empty homes. North America, because Paris, France, tripled their up to 60% on vacant homes in Paris. Paris was sick and tired of all these foreign investing in empty units, and it was turning the city into an empty shell. These lively cities into empty shells, and made homeowners rich overnight on paper. And it was pretty tough. It was pretty tough to go to some of those European cities that were completely bought out in empty shells. Vancouver's an empty shell. Sydney's becoming an empty shell. Melbourne's an empty shell. Auckland is an empty shell. London's an empty shell. Los Angeles is becoming an empty shell, surrounded by the homelessness. It's getting out of control. It's getting Oregon's becoming an empty shell. Portland is becoming an empty shell. Seattle is becoming an empty shell. Ever since Vancouver put on the foreign buyers tax in early 2017, tons of investors went south to King County and bought up Seattle's housing market, and they're blaming it on the tech people, the tech industry. It's not even close to the tech industry. Not even close to what the tech industry is overpricing the market. No way. Vancouver adopted North America's first tax on empty homes, and cities from New Orleans to Athens are grappling with an impact of Airbnb-type rentals that effectively set aside thousands of units for tourists. New York City installed its most sweeping tenant protections in decades in 2019, capping rent increases and eliminating loopholes. The move came after Amazon.com Inc.'s expansion plans were thwarted by community groups who feared residents would be priced out of the city. More governments have pledged to set up building. India aims to construct more than 40 million homes by 2022. Big companies have also responded. Alphabet Inc.'s Google pledged $1 billion to help create 15,000 homes in California. Still, that's a drop in the bucket to the state, with an estimate around a shortfall of 180,000 units. World's least affordable. Hong Kong's in first, as always. Vancouver in second, as always. Sydney in third. Melbourne in fourth. So the two major cities in Australia are pretty much out of reach. And there's not a lot of place to live in Australia. You could live around the coast, and that's about it. And once you start going, a lot of it is uninhabitable, you know? Then you got San Jose, LA, Auckland. So San Jose, LA, Auckland, San Francisco. That's all in California. Then you got London, Ontario, Toronto, San Diego, Miami, Seattle, New York, and Portland. There's Portland. Look at the West Coast. Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Jose. So there you go. Those cities right there, that represents the entire West Coast, and Vancouver. That represents the entire West Coast from Vancouver all the way down to Los Angeles. The background: in the 19th century, frame workers who flocked to cities crowded into squalid quarters near factories. Now, technology, healthcare, and finance and companies are pulling in throngs of white-collar workers, gentrifying neighborhoods close to transit links. That's displacing teachers, nurses, firefighters, office cleaners, and other essential workers, aggravating inequality. There's also more competition from international and institutional investors who's shifted money into real estate after a decade of low interest rates reduced returns on their assets. Supply hasn't kept up. Since the 1980s, the USA and the UK have scaled back investment in state-funded homes. These governments have largely gotten out of business of construction public housing, and instead encouraging development by nonprofit and private companies with subsidies or tax incentives. Many cities began to require development building luxury homes to set aside a small portion of units for lower income buyers or renters. But here's the problem: there's no money in low income housing, so that's why they don't want that. And I don't believe in low income housing myself. I believe in fairly priced homes scaled to income, average income. So the guy making an average income should be able to save for a couple of years and actually put a healthy down payment on his house and pay it off 10 to 15 years. Not this, oh, well, this is $1.2 million for this bungalow. Now I'm going to have to wait 25, 30 years to put a down payment down. Then I'm going to be eating taxes on the interest I make on any money that I make, or any capital gains on that. And then if I put it into an RSP, then I have to pay the tax. So it becomes so complicated. So that's contributed to a spike to homelessness in some of America's richest cities. The argument: critics of rent control say it's a crude solution that can backfire, scaring away investment and causing buildings to fall into despair, often resulting in fewer affordable units. But advocates say price caps can keep neighborhoods stable and slow the rate of gentrification. Private developers say they often have no choice but focus on expensive units because labor, materials, especially land, has gotten so pricey. Local governments, they say, can help the easing zoning rules, relaxing building codes, and overruling "not in my backyard" or NIMBY protests that stimulate projects. One controversial solution gaining support is to force more neighborhoods to accept higher density across the board. That is scary right there. Higher density across the board. You don't want that, people. Because of the first and the largest in the U.S. to end the single-family zoning, which means developers will be able to build homes for 2 or 3 families on each plot. So there it is. There it is. So the reference shelf. So this is what I wanted to read to you guys from Bloomberg here. Affordable housing. It's become out of reach for a long time. Unfortunately, living in Canada, it's even more complex because we only have 3 or 4 major cities. The state of Texas has more major cities and more infrastructure than all of Canada. That's just the state of Texas. Like you have Houston, okay? You got Dallas. You got Austin. You got San Antonio, right? You got Corpus Christi. You got so many major cities in Texas. In Canada, we don't have that many cities, just in Canada alone, the whole country. So Canada's scarcely populated when it comes to infrastructure into the interior of the country, right? I live in a town with 7,000 people, and I had to make that choice. If I was going to continue renting for the rest of my life in Vancouver, or am I going to be a slave to a home and buy a $2.2 million bungalow, right? That was the situation I was in. I was in that situation, like, what do I do? How do I make this work? How do I make this fly? How do I, you know what I'm saying? So the best thing for me to do was leave the city, and a lot of people have left the city. Who's going to pay $2.2 million for a two-bedroom bungalow? That's the question. So what's happening is in Canada, it's even tougher. In the States, you could move to Louisiana. You could move to South Carolina. You could move to Atlanta. You could move to Cheyenne. You could move to Amarillo, Texas. You could move to San Antonio. You could move to Fort Worth, Texas. There's so many cities you could move to in Canada. Vancouver, Toronto. And then you want to break it down. Then you got Montreal, kind of cold. Then you got Winnipeg. You got other little cities in between. And some of them are big cities, like Calgary and Winnipeg, Calgary, and Edmonton are bigger cities, you know. But still, I mean, they're still pricey. It's expensive. And the problem is the job market out there is pretty tough. Pretty dwindling job offers out in those areas. So in the States, they're a lot luckier. There, oh, I don't like California. I'm moving to South Dakota. You know, I don't like California. I'm moving to West Texas. Canada, we don't have that. It's very tough for us. Very limited here in Canada. Let me know what you guys think. Everyone's out of reach. Foreign investing is big. Watch last night's trends in the housing market, guys. We talked about the big story, how Chinese, the $4.3 billion spending machine of the Chinese investors are no longer spending. They're saving right now. And with the capital flows from China going to zero, it's going to be tough. And with New Zealand, they scrapped their build Kiwi house build or whatever, Kiwi build, their house thing that they were going to build 100,000 homes. I think they built 8 homes or 15 homes in New Zealand. So building or projecting to build X amount of homes for some reason always gets delayed, and it always lacks funding, and there's always red tape, or there's always protests from people in the area that don't want to build lower income housing in their area. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I would like to know what is happening. Watch trends in the housing market. There's a link for it right here. Trends in the housing market from last night. You want to watch this. Thanks for watching, guys.